what do you see as your biggest failure in your career so far?
In some ways, I'm probably still doing it because it's a creative thing. It's really difficult to quantify success in it.
You're putting your voice out, and then it has to echo and resonate with people as well, and there's that subjectivity there.
It can be really vulnerable because it is a part of you, and it's reflecting how you see the story or the world or a certain interaction or something. And if people don't like it, it can be quite personal.
Hello.
Hi there.
Welcome, Maddie. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm really good. So you're at MCM, I hear.
Yes, I am. Yeah, back in my hotel room because tomorrow's the first day of MCM in London, and I've just finished setting up. So yeah.
MCM Comic Con London. Is it the biggest show in the UK? Is that what it is?
I'm not 100% sure that it is.
LFCC is huge as well, though, so I don't know.
It is, and I think MCM does a Birmingham one that I haven't been to yet that I think is a bit bigger. So I'm not sure.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. So tell us about yourself first of all.
So I'm a writer and an illustrator. I've worked on comics such as The Preyground, which is currently on Kickstarter, and North Star, which is a sci-fi graphic novel. And I've recently also done Raven God, which was a Norse mythology graphic novel, which was a lot of fun. But otherwise, I do a lot of freelance illustration and writing work.
That sounds like that actually doesn't do you justice, actually, in a way. It's almost like skimming over the top. So me and Maddie have worked together for how many years now? It's been a number of years. I
think it's like coming up to like 10 years, or it's been
not coming up to 10. I refuse to believe it's 10. That's too long.
Honestly, it is.
Coming up to 10. Okay, yeah. 10 years. Let's say 9, just so we don't sound really old.
Yeah.
It's coming up to 9. It's 9 years, and I met Maddie years ago, apparently 10, and we worked together on a project on North Star.
It was my very first comic book, yes.
It was. You came to me rather boldly and were just, draw this, help me draw this. And I was like, well, okay. And we did, and it looked really good. And it was a great project to work on. And from there, I mean, I guess, I don't know. No, there was just something about the way you approached it, and there was a capability that you came with that kind of spoke to me in terms of, I just knew you had these aspirations and you had these things you wanted to do. And for some reason, I just believed you could do them, and we worked on a couple of things since then, quite a few things.
We have.
Do you remember what the first kind of like commercial project was?
Oh gosh. That might be a bit of a struggle. It was an illustration thing. I don't think it was Man and Madeleine. I think that was actually slightly later on.
That was.
It might have actually been an Alex Rider book.
Do you think it was?
I think it might have been.
So yeah, Maddie helps me quite extensively on the Alex Rider graphic novel series,
which was a bit of a dream come true because they were my favorite books growing up. So that really was quite amazing.
That's really, really cool. I was slightly too old for Alex Rider when it all came out. I remember there was a show called James Bond Jr. that kind of reminds me of it. But the sentiment of it is amazing, and it's super exciting. It is like James Bond for kids in a way.
It is.
Or kind of YA. And they're really cool books to work on. And I remember when I told you that we're going to be working on it, I remember you being very, very excited.
Oh.
And then there was Man of Medan, which was that Bandai Namco, like an in-game comic. I got really intense with you on that project, I remember, because I was really intense about the project.
Yeah.
And that was because it was such a tight deadline and it was over Christmas. And you really, really helped with that as well. Like that wouldn't have gotten done without you. And obviously there were other people working on that. Jacqueline. I always say Jacqueline. He kills me for it, but the colorist, and then I think Mindy left it, and that was really cool. But yeah, so we've worked together on lots and lots and lots of different things over the last 10 years, and Maddie is an awesome creator. And one of the reasons I wanted to speak to her was particularly about being an adaptable, versatile kind of creative person. Because you don't just, write, which was the first thing that we kind of like, which is how you were introduced to me. You don't just do the illustration side of things. You kind of do animation now as well, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
Or you're learning the ropes at the very least. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you
Dipping my toes into that. Well, from what you were saying with the versatility, I just keep finding a need to. There's things I want to do with the projects that I work on, and I have this awful habit of just going, oh, well, why didn't I do it? Why didn't I try and figure it out? So that's animation at the moment is the newest thing. So yeah.
Well, it's the natural progression, really, isn't it? From static imagery, you kind of want to start making them move, and maybe talk after a while. And that's kind of where I've gone with things lately, which is definitely interested in the motion side of things. So I was telling you about, we were talking about animation previously, and the idea of bringing the characters to life. Whether it's basic motion, whether it's kind of like a parallax 2.5D style parallax. So some of the our project together, the Rid of You key artwork and the promo artwork, we did some really cool kind of motion on that. That looks really good.
It does look really good.
Yeah, and then obviously I did a Ubisoft project at the beginning of this year, and they did kind of a 2.5D. It was more 3D, and I did the 2D side of things, and provided assets, and they used 3D. So it was kind of like, it was 2.5D, I guess, because it's between 2 and 3D. But that was really cool to see everything come to life in the way it did. But yeah, so animation is definitely a good string to add to your bow.
For sure.
So I mean, I guess in terms of versatility, yeah, that's something that you've been doing, and that's the sign of, in my view, kind of the mind of a creative, someone that's always kind of like wanting to learn how to create different things and new things and things like that. So that's really cool.
It has been the nature of the industry as well. I think it's an ever-changing industry, especially when you do more of an indie side of things. And quite often I found that, if you want to get something done, the best person you can rely on is yourself in a lot of cases as well. So it's just having that adaptability in that industry of bringing something new and fresh. I keep wanting to bring bigger, better things along. So
yeah. Well, it's I mean, I won't remember you said that for the next Alex Rider though. So yeah, no, I'm kidding. No, it's no, I need the help, to be honest. And so what Maddie was doing on what you were doing on those projects particularly is, so I might draw the project, kind of the line artwork, and then you would really help kind of add the volume and the dimension using kind of like, we use like a two-step color with a highlight as well.
Well, when I first started working for you, it started as just the sort of shadows on characters' faces and things like that. And then it progressed more to some background work as well in the panels. And then it became the flat colors and things, and then the highlights and the overlays and things. So it really grew from my first job.
Definitely did. And now you're drawing them all by yourself, and it looks really good. So yeah, I mean, what inspired you to, like, I know you said you have this like almost a compulsion, I guess, to create and to learn new things, but what do you think it was that initially inspired you to I guess, was your first thing, would you say, to be a writer, or is that something that kind of came first?
I think I've always been an incredibly visual person, and since I was a child, just consumed stories as much as I could. But I'm actually dyslexic, so reading did you not know that? Reading walls of text in books was really difficult for me as a kid. It would tire me out. It was not necessarily a pleasurable experience because I would feel so tired after reading. And then I discovered comics, and it was such an easier way to consume the same story. It was easier to read, it made sense, but you also got this visual aspect to it. And I was that kid in class that not only like drew and doodled in my books, I also wrote stories, which I actually found recently. I found all my exercise books, which are just full of stories and not work,
Well,
which is terrible. No, God, they're awful. No.
No. Any inspiration in them for a next project? No.
I don't think so, but they're actually very similar to that kind of fantasy and fairy tale and folklore type stories that I really love now and that I write now. So there's always been this through line of fantasy and folklore and mythology. I think I was one of those kids that was brought up on mythology stories, particularly like Greek mythology. And so yeah, I'm obsessed with mythology. So that's sort of where it all came from. It was finding a way to still consume stories that wasn't as tiring on my brain. Whether it was drawing, whether it was writing my own stories, or whether it was comic books.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, that's the moment I'm learning you're dyslexic. I didn't know that actually.
Yes.
I'm recounting the amount of extensive emails I would send you, like, and the whole team sometimes, like a big breakdown of kind of like a process that we might need to follow.
Yeah.
And then just imagining how exhausted you might be reading my email. I should have known that. That's terrible.
No,
That's my
I've
bad.
gotten better at it. It was growing up, I was quite lucky. I had quite a lot of support. So I've learned a lot of systems to kind of help it. So I still get it occasionally, but yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, I'll make a note and start sending you short emails after 10 years. But yeah, so I mean, I guess your passions are kind of like in mythology, and I guess would you say fairy tales? Is that fair to say, or fantasy?
Yeah, fairy tale, like the traditional fairy tales and things like that, are very interesting. They definitely have a sort of similar link to folklore. They obviously a bit more fantastical, because folklore was kind of used as like a way to warn people about things. Whether
stories are as well, though, aren't they? Really, like even the stories of today are, especially so.
Yes, and it sort of encapsulates a aspect of human psychology in each story that I find really interesting. And I did study psychology at A levels, and if I'd been a bit more academically inclined, I think I would have pursued that a bit more. So I do find it interesting, whether it's a story about sort of the human psyche, or whether it gets like characterized into beings and creatures and things. I just find it really interesting.
Cool. Well, yeah. So I mean, that kind of, I guess, informs some of the creative choices you've made with some of the projects that you've produced. So you wrote and tell us about is it I'm going to call it the Norse mythology project, but you know what
Raven God, yes.
Raven God. How do I never remember that? It's a really cool name.
Thank you.
Please carry on.
Yeah, Raven God specifically is really about the mythology itself, and the thing I love about the mythology of the Norse times is that they were really involved with us humans, and so it just leaves such potential for stories of them interacting, and how would they interact. And the wonderful thing about the old gods and things like that is that they weren't perfect people. There is an opportunity for so much characterization and drama, because they were such fickle and just crazy characters. So it's good fun to write about.
Yeah, I bet. And you've done one issue of that. Is that a continuation?
Yes.
Then? Is it one?
So book 2 and 3, it's a trilogy already written. They are being illustrated currently by Tyler Edward Wilson. He's great. I do love his work.
He's a really good yeah.
He came to me. Well, he said he voiced that he wanted to do a Viking comic, and I put myself forward. And yeah, so we've been working together since. And yeah, no, his stuff is fantastic. So.
Cool. and then obviously you kind of like, that's one of the many projects that you've done, and obviously one of the other projects that was, I guess, something I kind of roped you in on, that you were happy to participate in, is the upcoming project that we've done together, which is Rid of You.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure people may have heard about by now. I have been posting about it for like,
yes, it's both been shouting from the rooftops.
Yeah. Has it been bad? Has it been?
No,
Has it been...
no, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, cool. But yeah, so obviously that was something that I was kind of chewing over for kind of, I guess, a year. And I had like a rough idea and a rough set of characters and kind of a rough, I had a plot, and I had the themes, and I had the character arcs, and I had the characters, and some of their nuances. And then I kind of just said, look, I'm going around in circles with this. I don't know if I said this to you, but I was going around in circles with that, and I could not nail it. And I gave you the plot, and I gave you all of the things I come up with. And I said, this is basically, the story. And then you were able to come up with, I guess, the first, I mean, was it 6 issues? How do you remember this?
It was broken down into, I believe it was 6 issues that we then sort of combined into more graphic novels. And yeah, there was a lot of iterations, but from your feedback, it seemed like it started to come together a bit more once I'd given you sort of my take on it, because you really did have all this character info and all these plot points and everything, and I think, yeah, you just needed a bit of a outside look, and there was some connecting dots that you hadn't noticed and things.
Absolutely. There's definitely, and your passion. In fact, it was probably yourself that maybe swayed it more towards the fairy tale kind of framing of the story.
Yeah, I think it was. I apologize if that was not your intention.
No, there was a version of this where it was like a sci-fi space story. That's how round the block I'd gone with this.
Yeah.
No, but the way that you pitched that and the way that you put that together, it worked perfectly for some of the themes and the actual story, because the story is fundamentally kind of about the past and about memory, and there's actually lots of I guess fairy tale, or do you call it, like fantasy fairy tale kind of tropes that can lean into that you can subvert in certain ways, and you did do that very well. So after those 6 issues, again, it's changed so much since then. I mean, those 6 issues have now become probably more like 15. And yeah, so the first book, actually, it was going to be a 6-issue series, 6 issues of 24 pages. It's now turned into 320-page graphic novels. So book 1 is what we're going to be launching really soon, and you actually haven't seen the final
I haven't. No. I am really excited. I think the world that we've ended up creating for it is really beautiful, and I think it does sort of encapsulate this wonder that that the fairy sort of world and everything and imagination sort of brings to mind. I think we've managed to put that on the page really nicely. So
yeah,
but you've taken it again out of my eyes, so I don't know what you've done with it.
I know I could have totally ruined it. They could be in space again, like I don't know what I've done, but no, obviously I'll show you. I'm just polishing up some of them. It needed more, needed a bit more action, and it needed some of it just needed repacing slightly, but it's looking good. So I'll share it with you in the next couple of weeks. We're actually hoping to launch that towards the end of June. So that's maybe like a month away. So I'll definitely share with you before that, so you can. I need you to tell me if I've made it worse or better. And then obviously that leads on to the talking about genre and talking about flexibility and the flexibilities you operate within.
Yeah.
You've now tried your hand at horror.
Yes. Well, it's horror based on almost like religious backgrounds and things, because it's the story of Preyground is about demons, and infesting the local park, and causing havoc and mayhem and a lot of gore. Even though it's illustrated beautifully and very sweetly by Mark Thomas, it is very gory. But I part of the interest from mythology that I have also sort of weaves its way into religion and spirituality and things like that, and where we get those religious tales from and those religious ideas. And it kind of links back to Greek mythology, actually. Demons were kind of actually how we see guardian angels now. So they weren't good or evil. Everyone had a demon that just guided them like a spirit guide through life. Yeah, so not good or bad, but because of maybe one religion wanting to take precedent over another, it's been taken and transformed into demons, bad, evil things from hell, and I find that really interesting, and those kind of ideas and where things come from. So that's kind of influence. It's kind of a traditional horror book, and there is a lot of suspense and everything, but there are these underlying sort of ideas.
That's cool. So I guess you've taken kind of the things that you love and kind of, and one of my questions was kind of like how you straddle different genres, but in a way you've kind of answered it there, which is
yes,
you kind of inject your passion,
yeah,
and then you.
And I think I was telling you previously about when I write something, I like to set the vibe for how I write. So if I'm writing a horror story, I create a musical playlist for every single story I write, that sets me in the mood, that sets the atmosphere. If it's a sort of historical one like Raven God, then I do a bit of research so I know what I'm visualizing. And then because I have all the folklore and mythology background, I kind of know the tales as well, and I can bring that all in, so it becomes a sort of a soundscape and visual imagery, and just to set the atmosphere for me. So yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. And so Preyground is it? Is it issue 2 or book 2? Are they single
It's
issues?
book 3 now.
Book 3? Oh, 1, 2,
Yeah.
3. Of course it is. Yeah.
So
Okay.
they're issues, so they're a little bit smaller than a graphic novel. We're on the 3rd one now. There are many more written. It's not stopping or slowing down yet. And it's currently live on Kickstarter. So link in my bio, as they say.
I'll add the link to my bio as well, just so it's in there. But I'm interested with it because I like the art style and I like the premise of the story, and there's like a juxtaposition there because it's quite an adult story.
Yes.
With I would say I guess more of a style that may suit a younger audience, which is super interesting.
It is.
So how suitable is it for younger? Like what would you call the kind of like the key demographic for the book?
So we do give a content warning for the gore, but we've actually received a lot of messages from parents who have bought it for themselves, but then because of the art style, they've actually ended up reading it with their children, like young children who have loved it.
Okay.
So we've actually managed to kind of bridge the gap.
Nice.
We do get a lot of older audiences that really enjoy it, but the art style kind of just adds this little bit of innocence if it's a little bit too much.
Yeah, it's like almost like unassuming in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. So you're having success across the board with different age ranges.
Yeah, it's
with
really nice.
A fairly gory, scary book.
Yeah.
I hope you're proud.
Oh,
No, I'm kidding. No, really, that's quite an achievement. No, it is quite the achievement. So is that what you're going to be focusing on at the Comic-Con this weekend?
Yes. We're going to be pushing Preyground for sure. There is Raven God and things like that, but yeah, it's going to be a horror themed table for the weekend.
And how do these shows normally go? I mean, I kind of do them from purely an artist perspective. So if I'm doing a convention or things, I'm normally sketching, and usually, hopefully, not always, but usually, hopefully, like a book's been out recently. So whether it was Alex Rider or whether it was some of the earlier books that I'd worked on, and that kept me occupied and busy. Well, as you know, actually, you've been with me at these shows. I tend to.
You tend to wander off, yeah.
I tend to wander off, and I tend to go and talk to people and do that.
Which I can understand. There's so many creatives and so much talent to look at and interact with. But yeah, someone's got to be on the table.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. So you're going to be focusing on Preyground this weekend. That's really, really awesome.
Yes, yeah.
And so I mean, I guess like I'm mindful of your time as well, because I know you've got MCM tomorrow, and I know you may want to rest up, and we've covered quite a lot of ground in quite a short space of time. But I like to ask three things to everybody, because one of the things that I'm really trying to do here is to focus on informing aspiring creators or just anyone really, but ideally aspiring creators, maybe of lessons learned, of the good, the bad, and the ugly of people's experiences with creating, and just generally just talk to fun, interesting, creative people. So like one of the things I like to ask everyone is, what is one of your biggest accomplishments to date?
I think my biggest accomplishment is actually having this as a career. I really put myself out there when I approached you to do North Star, which was the first comic, and every single opportunity I've received from just trying and just sort of saying yes would have blown my very young mind. I did not know that this was a career, that this was a viable option and things, and that I could do what I love, which is just making up stories for a living. And I've got to, like I said, Alex Rider was one of my favorite books growing up, so to be able to work on that in some way, or have my name attached to that in some form, was absolutely crazy to me. So yeah,
there's another one coming out in a few months, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Which is quite cool. No, that's really, I mean, to be honest, it's not an easy, it's very hard to make a career in the arts generally. I've experienced the kind of like the creative illustration, kind of art direction, graphic design side of things, and there are areas that are easier, areas that are harder. I would say kind of advertising and publishing have been a bit easier, but then advertising has been a bit easier, publishing is a bit harder. But you've really got to straddle all of those areas and focus on, which you have done, focus on, you are just, every brief is the same almost, and you are taking an abstract brief or a written form of a brief or a rough concept, and you are visualizing it and bringing it to life, creating a product out of it, and it's fundamentally always the same thing over and over and over. And when you start looking at it that way, you start to understand that there's little differentiation between a graphic novel or an animation or even in my really early career, like designing a brochure or a website when I was in graphic design like years and years ago. And it's the same with you, I think, with the versatility.
The initial process of coming up with an idea and everything is the same. It's just the execution then of creating it physically is different. But ultimately, otherwise, it's the same thing of that spark and building something around this idea and then doing the physical steps needed. Yeah.
Falls down to color, shape, typography. That's kind of how I see things. It's okay, that's a really good answer. So I mean, the next one is fairly obvious, but what do you see as your biggest failure in your career so far?
I think in some ways I'm probably still doing it. Even though I had that bold moment of stepping out at the start of my career, I think my biggest failure now is holding myself back and not acknowledging how far I've come and all the things that I've done to get here. Because if I knew that and I was aware of that, the steps that I could take in the future and everything would be unstoppable. But by putting yourself out there in something that I never studied, I just tried my hand at it, gives
you tell
you
me.
it gives you incredible imposter syndrome, and um, listening to that is the greatest failure for sure.
That resonates. I think that will resonate with a lot of
Yeah.
people in terms of, it's only once you've proven that something's possible that you look back and go, there was so much more that was possible. And that is almost one of the conundrums of life. And like, that'll be like, that's like deathbed material, like not to go too dark, but that's like super, super, like, that's like life insight right there. That's a good one. That resonates with me actually as well. I would say the same thing about myself.
A lot of people in the industry, because it's a creative thing, it's really difficult to quantify success in it. And because people have naturally different styles and different abilities and things, we get such a sense of imposter syndrome because we're completely different to other people, and you don't necessarily get the same level of gratification or validation as other businesses do.
Not quantifiable. That's one of the reasons it's so hard to monetize. And it's like, but it's not even just that we have different styles and different. It is that, but then it's also that there's a sounding board element to this, which is you're then putting your style, you're putting your voice out, and then it has to echo and resonate with people as well. And there's that subjectivity there. So there's that feedback or lack thereof, depending on how it all goes. That's also another variable. There's so many variables. It's really hard. There's a big dose of luck involved to a degree, I'd say.
Luck, and it can be really vulnerable because by creating something like that through your illustrations or through your writing, it is a part of you, and it's reflecting how you see the story or the world or a certain interaction or something. And if people don't like it, it can be quite personal.
It can be, but it shouldn't be. Like, I've compared this. I agree with you, but it shouldn't be, because, like, okay, so imagine a project manager puts together like a project plan, and he or she's got all of their kind of like their creative resource. They've got all of their deadlines. They've got client approval, check-in points, all of this stuff, and then I don't know, someone higher up in the company says, no, this is rubbish. Like, does that have the same impact? It should technically, because they have put themselves into it in a way, but they haven't. I haven't figured that out yet. Why is that different? I can't figure out if it is or isn't different.
I think it does make a difference as well, how in a business setting, how people respond to your work, because it does feel more like business as opposed to something personal. Like if you're doing a commission piece, there's a slightly different emotional response to it. Whereas if someone's not hitting the brief for like professional reasons, it doesn't quite hit the same.
Yeah, I agree, but I still can't quite figure it out. I can't quite let that lie in a way in my head, because one of my things is sometimes, and as an artist, as someone that creates for a living, sometimes I think an artist can take themselves too seriously.
Sometimes.
And that I don't want to say that's an exclusive thing. Everyone's different, but that's something I've noticed as a pattern dealing with lots of artists. It's not a bad thing. It's like it's probably a good thing, because it means they care about what they're doing, and it means they take themselves seriously enough to hone their craft and to want to do the best they can do. And this all ties into it being a part of the self or not. But yeah, I'll need a few more years, maybe like a mountaintop in like the Himalayas or something to figure that out. I don't know. But, and then the last thing I always ask everyone, or I'm getting into the habit of asking everyone, because you're technically the third person that I've done this with. What is one lesson you've learned kind of along your journey that you could share that might help aspiring creators?
Well, it's quite an obvious one to me. It would be to say yes to everything. Even if you're not sure how to do it. There was a lot of work that you asked me to do that I said, yeah, I'll do that. And I had no idea how to do it. And I just figured it out.
I remember thinking that. I remember thinking, she doesn't know how to do this, but she's going to figure it out. Like,
yes, I was I was desperate that like I was loving this work and I wanted to get further and do better and do more, like do more of the work that we were doing. So it just made sense to say yes to everything. Like
That's really
if I
good
want more of
advice.
it, just keep doing it. And I think you'll agree, where I started art-wise and things like that to where I am now is a hell of a lot better than it
It's
was.
really, you can definitely see the huge leaps and bounds of improvement.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Even if just on a confidence level and execution level, like you were always executing, to be fair to you, like that's how we started working together. But this idea of saying yes to everything, I could not agree with that more. That is the one thing that has gotten me further than anything. Well, someone saying something. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. More importantly, just because you can't doesn't mean you shouldn't. That's nice. That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that comes into like having creative standards, or having not necessarily creative standards, but having a standard for what it is that you want to opt into or not. It's not necessarily just saying yes to everything. Maybe it is in the first instance, but as you kind of grow, you can start to say no to things or be more selective. Depends on what you're doing it for.
This was very much, I was loving the work that I was doing for you. I wanted to do more of that. This is what I wanted to do career-wise. So if there was more opportunities coming up, even if I was scared because it was something I wasn't sure how to do, I was going to say yes because it was absolutely what I wanted to be doing. So it was kind of that manifestation thing of, if you really want to be doing something, then if you're actively doing it, you're going to get to that point, rather than just back and not
Is it
doing
like a fake it till you make it type of thing?
it. Very much so, yeah.
In a way. No, but I got to say, I just to go back to the original point, your point, and every step I've taken along the way to get to a supposed next level has been me going, yeah, sure, and not really knowing what to do. And like, there is, I like the sentiment here of just because you can doesn't mean you should, and just because you can't doesn't mean you shouldn't.
Yeah.
It kind of encapsulates both sides. Everything's a double-edged sword, and it kind of encapsulates both sides of that coin. But I will say to any aspiring creators who are trying to get to the next level, it's not necessarily a case of saying, I can do everything, give me work. But when the opportunity comes along and the likelihood is that you can fulfill that with nothing but the correctly placed confidence in your abilities, you should just do it, like 100%, with no fear.
There was even times where I was probably pushing it a little bit with, there's some points where I was thinking, I'm really not sure if I can actually do this. And I think those were the times when I was more honest with you. And I said, I don't really know how to do this, but I really want to try and do this. Will you let me? And I'll figure it out. And
yeah, and you have every time, actually. Yeah, you have. There was one time you translated. We did a Marvel. Was it the watch brand and the Marvel thing with LeBron in, and you translated one of those into Japanese, didn't you?
I believe it was Japanese. Yes.
Mandarin, perhaps.
It was Mandarin.
Yeah, that was that. I kind of called you last minute. I was like, I just need this translated into Mandarin. And you were like, okay.
That was a bit of a manifestation moment as well. You told me you were working on a Marvel project, and I went, I want to work on that Marvel project.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You called me up one day, really last minute, and said, "Can you do this?" And never done it before in my life. It was the first time I did any sort of lettering, and it was in a different language that I had to translate. And I just said, "Yes, I'm going to figure it out."
You did, and you did it, and no one said anything, so I can only assume it was correct. I hope someone proofed it. But it was,
I really hope.
Yeah. But yeah, cool. So this has been really great. And yeah, I'm really glad we got to do this. I know we've apparently, as you say, known each other and worked together for 10 years, but it's been nice to do this in more of a public kind of setting.
Yes. I mean, we've had a conversation about some things that we haven't actually spoken about working together for that long. So
that's true. That's true. You're dyslexic.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I hope MCM Comic Con goes really well. If there's people, I don't know if people, I'll probably post this video tomorrow, and I imagine there'll be people that will see it that may be going to MCM. go and say hi to Maddie, who's at table.
I'm at table K04 in the Artist Alley.
K04 in the Artist Alley. This video won't age well, but for tomorrow at least, it will work. And I'll put your Kickstarter link in my bio, and it'll be in your bio as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's do this again. And I hope the weekend goes really well, and I'll speak to you really soon.
Great. Thank you so much.
Cheers, Maddie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.